Alright then, can't believe I'm actually recording another one of those. Not because there aren't any stars left to explore. Hell, this very mission is a proof enough that we might have missed quite a lot of them in our own territory, but with diplomatic tension all across our borders, most of the exploration missions have been recalled, and aside from our own territory, and that of some of our allies, free, uninterrupted movement across the stars became a thing of the past. But that's not the topic of this recording, so here we go. Captain's Log, 2255, Commander Shen Kuo of CSV Tesla speaking. The following is the summary of my report of our diplomatic mission to the Valin system. The mission began in the same way they all do, equipment checks, logistical paperwork and the like, but as soon as we entered the Valin system, it became obvious that this particular mission may be a bit more complicated than we initially expected. For one, when we entered the system, our sensors were unable to lock onto the Valin homeworld. Every time we tried, the readings were completely off the charts, and sometimes there were no readings at all. But we had a rough estimate, so we proceeded with the mission. And we quickly realized that Valin wasn't actually a full-fledged planet. It was a moon, orbiting a much larger world, and it was that larger object, inconveniently located between our jump point and our destination, that threw off our readings. But the closer we got to this mysterious planet, the more we realized that it may be something that none of us has ever seen in our travels. For one, the planet was fully covered in a veil of odd purple vapor. Not that weird in itself, but it turned out to be the source of all our sensor disruptions. For reasons we can't, to this day, understand, this world was impossible to scan. All automated probes we sent there disappeared as soon as they touched the atmosphere, and that's not an exaggeration on my part. After we lost first few, I decided to send them in groups so they could monitor each other, and there it was, clear as day on the video feed. In one frame, a group of probes are approaching the atmosphere, and in the very next, the one that crossed some invisible border simply vanished without a trace. No explosion, no malfunction, it just disappeared like it never existed in the first place. And to make matters even more mysterious, when we got closer to this world, we learned the reason of our sensor malfunction. The planet, simply put, emanated some form of signal on its own, one that was nearly impossible to trace by our equipment, and even then it was imperceivable to any one of my crew. It was only through sheer luck that our sensors managed to pick it up at all, but we still had no idea what its purpose may be, if there even was any. But there was no time to wonder about it, because as we got around this mysterious planet, we finally managed to pick up some scans of our target, and we realized that we have failed our mission before it even begun. Valin was silent. Where we hoped to see lights of cities, there was only darkness. Where we hoped to hear radio transmissions, there was only silence. And the planet itself, perhaps beautiful and fertile world some time ago, was nothing more but a burned out husk, covered in ruins and clouds of deadly radiation. It was a tomb world, and now, when we were finally able to scan it properly, it became obvious what happened. The inhabitants of this world destroyed themselves in a global nuclear conflict, one that clearly spiraled out of control and turned into an extinction event. But although the diplomatic part of the mission was out of the window, the crew and I were determined to land on Valin anyway, if only to confirm our predictions. Some of us hoped to find some survivors, but even from orbit it was obvious that levels of devastation on this world were far too great for anyone to make it out alive. Still, we landed on the surface, following the only scrap of data we had, that message from Valin Extrasolar Institute that had in it the location of the facility. Perhaps, we hoped, whoever was there had enough sense to prepare for this conflict. Perhaps the signal they sent us was not an invitation but an SOS. And we were right. Whoever was in charge of the Institute was clearly preparing for the nuclear winter, but they didn't prepare enough. And when we finally entered the facility, we saw the effects of those insufficient preparations. There were around 200 Valin corpses in the facility, males and females alike, that all died from starvation. The Institute protected them from radiation, it had a nearly infinite source of water, but it simply wasn't able to feed all the survivors who, if our readings are correct, have resorted to eating their own dead in the end. And this would have been the end if not for the fact that founders of this facility had more ambitious plans in mind. In the main control room, we found a computer with several video logs detailing the fall of Valin civilization and the struggle of the last few survivors here in this institute. The disease, the darkness and the hunger. But it was the last message, once we translated it, that truly put everything on its head. to anyone who may find it. My name is Akazur, son of Wukazur, and the last living member of the Valin race. And by now, I too have probably joined my brothers and sisters in the void. If you are listening to this, then there is a good chance that you were brought here by the message my father sent into the stars. If that's the case, then on behalf of my entire race, I'm sorry for dragging you all the way here, only to sift through the ashes. Shame that you haven't arrived sooner though. And if you are, improbable as it is, another Valin, then allow me to offer my apologies as well. As a director of this institute, I was supposed to prevent situations like this one, or at the very least prepare for them. Instead, I failed. But if you are one of my own people, then you probably know all this. As for you, hypothetical guests, allow me a word of explanation. As my father said in his message, the Valin were never a perfect people. Our history is full of pointless conflicts and foolish decisions, but we tried our best to fight back against our violent instincts. When the last Great War ended inconclusively nearly 200 cycles ago with nearly 3/4 of our population dead, the nations of Valin decided to fall back and resolve their differences by peaceful means, and a global alliance was formed to prevent us from wiping ourselves out. And for a long time it worked. For over 170 cycles we lived in peace, and used that time to further our scientific progress and rebuild our society. But the lessons of the Great War were, it seems, not enough. About 30 cycles ago, a new movement has appeared in the Alliance, a movement that called for its dissolution, and to this day we still have no idea how they managed to do it, for their agenda was nothing short of insanity. They claimed that unity brought by Alliance was destroying individuality of each Valin tribe. They preached that peace we all enjoyed was against our nature, and they romanticized war so that generations who grew not knowing it would not consider it a pointless meat grinder but a light-hearted adventure. They preyed on the basest fears and insecurities, and yet, with each passing day, their support for the cause grew, something that most of our race failed to even acknowledge, let alone recognize as a credible threat to our lives. But, year by year, this movement grew in power, and under their pressure, First Nation broke away from the Alliance 14 cycles ago. Then, it was an avalanche. One by one, tribes from across Valin distanced themselves from each other over petty reasons, and sometimes even over grudges from hundreds of cycles ago. Peace disappeared almost overnight, and soon our people returned to their aggressive nature, as if the Alliance never existed. Perhaps leaders of this political movement are to blame. Perhaps our people are too, for believing their propaganda. But it doesn't matter now. Whoever is guilty of this global insanity is now dead, same as everybody else, except me. But as I said, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that around 400 suns ago, first bomb fell on the capital of the old Alliance. Over the next 2 days, our sensors registered over 11,000 additional detonations all across the world. It was all over within a week. Over the next cycle, I tried my best to keep the staff of this facility alive, but as you clearly can see, that too had failed. Truth is, there was never any chance for us to survive here, so the resources were transferred to another project, one that can give our people a second chance, however small it may be. I only regret being forced to deceive my own people, to watch them fall one by one to sickness and starvation, but it had to be done, for all Valin. And now I'm alone, surrounded by corpses of my friends. But I'm ready for the last part of our plan. A plan that my father began nearly 50 cycles ago, and one that I will now finish no matter what. It will be difficult to see it through on my own, but if I'll succeed, then our people may yet survive this devastation. If I have to pay for it with years of solitude in the dark and lone death far away from home, then so be it. If I recorded everything correctly, then you should now see the coordinates of an underground base on the moon we call Ethra. If you can, follow them, and perhaps we'll meet. And if we won't, which is far more probable, then know that people of Valin put all their faith in you, stranger. I put all my faith in you. I can only hope you are better than we were. Akazur, signing off. It took us a while to decode this message, and during that time we moved to scan Idward, the purple world that disrupted our sensors. It was there that we found yet another proof of just how advanced the Valin were. While the planet itself was clearly hostile and impossible to explore, the insectoids still managed to use it for their own needs, as it was surrounded by dozens of small satellites that acted as communications array, and it was one of those satellites that sent the signal we picked up, which makes Valin efforts even more impressive. If our own, far more advanced sensors had trouble dealing with interferences coming from this planet, I can only guess how difficult it must have been for the Valin to establish all this infrastructure, and yet they managed to do it. However, no matter how impressive that ring of satellites was, it still paled when compared to what we found on Ethra. The Extrasolar Institute really had an underground base there, and the Valin known as Akazur somehow managed to get to it after his homeworld was destroyed. But it was also here when we learned of complications. In short, Ethra turned out to be a turning point of this mission, and not only for the Commonwealth. Recordings on, I think. This is evacuation log number 1, Akazur of Valin speaking. According to the plan, I managed to make my way to Ethra in a transport rocket designed specially for this operation. Unfortunately, I made some mistakes when calculating trajectory and ended up landing away from the station. I'm gonna have to spacewalk all the way over there now, but if everything went according to plan, then there should be a rover there that I can use to deliver the goods I brought with me to the base. If not, then I will just have to walk back and forth. I went too far to back down now. Evacuation log number 2. It has been 40 suns since I landed on Ethra, and today the first part of my mission is finally complete. The entire database is safely locked up in the vault, where it will, hopefully, survive for millions of years, unless there's a power failure, which brings me to the second part of my mission. I'm gonna have to walk out there again and ensure that all solar panels are operating at full capacity. Evacuation log number 3. This is it. 100 suns after the landing and my job is done. The panels are fully restored and the automated systems are in place to keep them operational for a long, long time. My people may be gone, but at the very least their memories will survive. And one day, who knows, maybe one day they will receive their second chance. Evacuation log number 4. 300 suns after the landing. Supplies are running out. I don't want to starve to death like my fellow researchers back home. I'm going to do one last round across the facility and then I'm signing off. Evacuation log number 5. It cannot be. I went outside to check the solar panels and I saw something moving out there in the sky. I thought it was just insane hallucination caused by spending over a cycle alone, but it's not. The station's radars are seeing it too. I can't believe it. It was 1 in a million chance, and yet here they are. A spacefaring civilization made their way to us. I can already see them on the cameras. They look almost like Rickon's wings, a type of flower that used to grow on Valin, and they are so bright, so grossly incandescent, and they sing. I can hear their song even here, through the walls of the station. They're coming. The light is coming. We're saved. That was the last report we got. After this final log, there are no further traces as to whereabouts of the last living Valin, but a quick sweep of the station confirmed our worst suspicions. Somehow, by unknown means, a Zrakan cruiser-sized vessel managed to slip into the system undetected by our sensors, landed on the moon Ethra, raided the base, and departed mere days before our arrival. How they managed to do it we cannot tell. We immediately informed the Naval Command, but they were just as surprised as we were. There were no reports of Zrakan movement for years, and with all the military facilities being built on our northern border, someone would have noticed them. But that was a mystery for our military to solve. We had far more pressing matters to attend to. For reasons unknown, the Zrakan only enter first level of the Valin station before they left, but as we continued further, we found something remarkable. Not a data repository, as we initially expected, but a complete data bank of Valin population, literally. We already had our suspicions that these insectoids were far more advanced than we expected, but not a single one of us saw this coming. The data vault was filled with memory banks, complete scans of Valin brains, in detail that would be impossible to achieve even with our technology. In fact, these neural scans were so detailed that they were virtually undistinguishable from regular organic brains. In that moment we realized this was not a tomb, but a preserve, 3 billion minds were scanned and uploaded into data cores of this base. 3 billion Valin, whose bodies evaporated when nuclear fire consumed their homes, were still, in a way, alive within this base. They banked on a near impossible chance that someone will find that vault, someone with technology that would be sufficient enough to bring them back to life using these scans. And according to my technicians, we had that technology. But it was not a decision to be taken lightly. For a moment, our mission has been put on hold, and I contacted the Science Council to relay this revelation. As you might expect, it took them a while to get their jaws off the floor, but once they started to think about it, they realized just how many issues this could cause. 2 days later, backed by the Chancellor herself, the Science Council came to a decision. We were to continue our mission, while a special team would be sent to secure the Valin vault and transport all the brain cores back to Ortus. We, on the other hand, were to return out there and get as many clues about Valin people as we could. After all, if they managed to build this base on Ethra, there was a good chance that they also explored other planets in the system. Perhaps some managed to survive there, but even if they didn't, then we should at least gather some information about them. What kind of people they were, what we could expect from them. After all, they wiped themselves out, and there would be no reason for us to bring them back just so they could do it once again. Now, one thing that made this mission different from our first travels was the fact that we had constant access to newest information. Half a century ago, before we developed faster-than-light communications, talking with home was nearly impossible. Today, we could gather in the crew lounge and watch the news from home as if we never left Ortus. And what news they were. In the Bish system, our freshly built Inti solar station was quickly becoming Commonwealth's main tourist attraction, as well as one of the most critical power plants. On Zanam, that obelisk we found turned out to be such a treasure trove of knowledge that the government decided to designate the planet as a research world. Some, of course, protested, claiming that it would be better suited to become yet another cultural and tourist center, but the truth was undeniable. The obelisk alone was enough to give our researchers something to do for generations to come, but when backed with a specialized planet-wide research facility, it could become a stepping stone to a new era of unparalleled scientific discovery. Plus, of course, such a decision would allow us to preserve Zanam's specific biome, something that would be far more difficult to do with billions of tourists moving in and out every year. Of course, some tourist facilities will still be built. Zanam is simply too beautiful to pass such an opportunity, but they will not be their main focus. That's Commonwealth for you. Pragmatism above all. And on Uzema, our Aramathi brothers and sisters officially accepted our way of government, direct democracy. Up until now, most of the Aramathi were still operating in a semi-oligarchic way, rallying behind their speakers, but this development was a first step towards their full integration into our society. The racial caste system they used in the old galaxy was gone for years now, but this was just as important. And finally, in early June of 2254, the news stations exploded with information about successful end of genetic adaptation project. From Yadrani to Moros, human citizens of the Commonwealth all successfully went through the process of genetic modification that reduced their adaptability issues, as well as our slowed growth rate. We, on board of Tesla, were already treated, of course, but nonetheless these news were met with overwhelming cheer from my team. Most of us took part in this project, in one way or another, and it was a great moment for us all. Our wisdom managed to improve our entire race, an achievement so great that we had to call for a resupply ship to bring more drinks to Tesla's onboard cantina. Not the most professional behavior, sure, but I'd say we deserved this one. And soon, our job was done. Sadly, we were unable to find any more Valin people, alive or otherwise. But we found some tools they have left behind. On Valin 5, we found a small group of automated scout vehicles, an impressive feat considering that this planet was nearly on the other side of the system from Valin homeworld. In the orbit of Valin 7, we have found a small subspace probe that was designed to travel to nearest star, but was unfortunately pulled by the gravity of this planet. And, to our surprise, we found a plaque on board of this probe, a plaque that described Valin civilization and contained a map on how to reach them. Not that surprising on its own, but then we realized that our ancestors on Earth have done exactly the same thing nearly 300 years ago. Perhaps their probe is still out there, moving through the void, but regardless, it means that we have more in common with the Valin than we initially expected. After all, it seems we think along similar paths. And that was it. Aside from these 2 relics, the rest of the system was empty. No Valin managed to survive their self-imposed extinction. So, once we gathered all the data, we sent it back to the Science Council and returned home. Now, it is up to the Council to decide what to do with Valin neural scans. As for us, for our performance, both during this mission and previous ones, our next assignment was to oversee research on Zanam. Perhaps undeservedly, after all, our mission ended up in a failure, but I can't imagine a better way to end this career. It's time for the greatest shore leave this galaxy has ever seen. Commander Shenkuo, signing off.
Construction project concluded.
I'm going to be blunt with you, councillors. Despite months of deliberations, the future of the Valin remains an extremely volatile topic in the Parliament. Every time it seems that we're going to reach a majority for any of the options, a new dispute opens up that completely messes up the voting, which means that by now the government is almost completely deadlocked. Ishi mentioned that it looks almost like it did back when he and Tessa came into power. All sides are simply too unsure of potential consequences, and they prefer to stall indefinitely rather than make a decision. Which leads me to you. In the latest meeting, I proposed that, since you are the ones responsible for Valin neural scans, you should be the ones to make a decision. If the Science Council votes for or against Valin resurrection, it should be enough to convince the politicians, as well as the rest of our people, to make a stand. And, conveniently for you, it would also make us responsible for any issues that such a decision may cause. Like always. Fortunately for you, we spent last few months discussing that topic as well, so we should have an answer by now. No, we do not. I refuse to take part in this nightmarish Frankenstein experiment you and Roman are trying to pull, no matter what you or the Chancellor says. Damn it, Nestor, we have this conversation 100 times already. If we manage to understand that technology, the applications would be irrelevant compared with all the issues caused by you playing God. If you could say for sure that this resurrection will work, then I would not oppose it, but you can't. I see you are just as divided as the rest of us, and it's clear that you have put some thought into it, so let's hear it. Well, Chancellor, as you can clearly hear, I am completely and openly against this terrible idea, but unfortunately I am in the minority here. Dr. Poniewski is understandably for it, since he is a programming specialist and this is essentially his forte, but Professor Tanwa supports him simply because she can. I honestly can't think of any other reason why you, a biologist of all people, would support this. I can speak for myself, Nestor, thank you. The real issue here is what we consider this Science Council is about. Professor Lachinov here is an engineer, which means that his ideas are, understandably, grounded in reality, even if said reality means designing weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations within weeks. To Roman, this is a matter of his personal expertise, but as for me, science is about pushing boundaries. When I started this job, I wouldn't even dream about rewriting DNA sequences, or turning an animal into a thinking citizen. Today, we may not believe that these neural scans will truly allow us to bring Valin back to life, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I mean, we have in our hands tools to bring an entire extinct and intelligent species back to life. It is our duty, both to the Valin and to the science itself, to bring them back. Yes, but bring them back as what? Mindless walk droids? Dead-eyed automatons that will walk upright and speak predetermined lines based on their neural scans? Truth is, while we may have tech to put them into robotic bodies, we have no idea if it will truly bring them back. After all, we do not have the ability to create artificial minds, do we not? Not truly sentient ones, at least. That is unfortunately true. Oh, then are you meaning to tell me that we can't give the Valin real life, and yet you still support the idea of bringing them back, Dr. Poniewski? Yes, Chancellor, for several reasons. One, what actually is life? For all we can tell, it's consciousness. What is consciousness then? A set of electrical impulses inside our brains. What are our brains? Nothing more but highly advanced organic computers. So advanced, in fact, that we cannot yet build an artificial version of it. But despite that, it seems that the Valin knew more about inner workings of the brain than we do, and their scans show their knowledge in amazing, never-before-seen detail. Which brings me to a second point, increasing our own knowledge. Yes, our current processors and programming may not be up to the task of housing a fully developed mind, but the good thing about computers is that they can be upgraded. By placing Valin neural scans into our current robots, we would be able to monitor the way their neural pathways work and, in time, upgrade them. It may even teach us how to program real, sentient AI one day. I don't think that would be a good idea, Doctor. But one thing at a time. If I understand correctly, you are trying to say that we will be able to bring the Valin back, but they wouldn't be fully developed, mentally at least. Am I right? Good. But you also say that if we bring them back, we could one day upgrade our tech and give them, hypothetically, real sentience, albeit a cybernetic one. If that's the case, then why shouldn't we wait until we have this better technology? It's not like these scans can't wait. Honestly, Chancellor, I simply do not believe that we will be able to figure out sentient AI on our own without data we could gather from Valin. Believe me, my department and I spend years banging our heads against this issue, but no matter what, we simply can't do it. So in order to truly give Valin back their lives, we would have to first bring them back as walking encyclopedias, essentially. They would have access to their memories, they could perform tasks our regular droids can, but they won't be, alive, not in a strict sense. I see. And how do you know that they will behave like that? This was a very detailed description for... Alright, no need to act all suspicious. My department and I, we already brought one of the Valin back as an experiment. You what? Okay, you are officially more insane than Tanwa. What made you... Peace, Professor Lachinov. I expected something like that. Well, Ishi expected something like that. So tell me, what should we expect? A child, mentally impaired child made out of steel and polymer. As I said, they retain their memories in this form, but not their personalities. They can learn and process information, but they lack creativity to use it in any manner that we won't program ourselves. In short, they would become regular droids, but with extensive knowledge of Valin culture and history. And knowing this, are you still willing to go through with this plan? To bring these living beings back, but rob them of their sentience? Yes, Chancellor, because I know that by studying them, we'll be able to fully restore their minds one day. Unless something goes wrong, as it usually does. But alright, so, I see that you are unfortunately outvoted here, Professor Lachinov. I will tell the Parliament that the Science Council approves the resurrection plan. I just hope you bloody well know what you're doing.
A declaration of war has been
Okay, here goes. This is Drahoslav Teza, former Chancellor of Ortus Council of Nations and then the Commonwealth. In light of recent events, I decided to start recording my own secure personal logs for posterity, in case something goes wrong. I hope that by leaving politics I will no longer get stressed by all the events unfolding around our nation, but I think I might have been a Chancellor for a bit too long to just forget about all this and relax. But let's start from the beginning. In January 2255, we received grim news from the north. The Berserkers, a civilization that exists seemingly only to fight and eradicate other races, have declared a war on Xenak Forge, a mysterious machine empire that, up until now, remained peaceful and relatively inert. But because of established alliances, our own allies, the peaceful Utkavongo, have been dragged into this war as well. Now, the Utkavongo may be important allies, and even more important citizens given their ability to adapt to nearly any environment, but war just isn't in their nature, and although they joined the conflict, they have done so with considerable reluctance. And, as expected, mere weeks after the war began, we received reports of millions of Utkavongo citizens fleeing their homelands to join their fellows who were already living within our borders. In theory, we can only gain from this situation, but in practice, it put a certain strain on our diplomatic relations. The Utkavongo states may be peaceful, but they need their citizens to defend themselves, and if all of their people will flee to us, that will become impossible. Now, I'm far from returning to an active role in politics, but perhaps I could talk with Chancellor Lin and convince her to review the immigration policy regarding the Utkavongo. No, that will not work. Lin is a leader of Xenoists after all, so she won't be able nor willing to close the borders to them. But they can't always resolve their problems by running. Perhaps there may be another way to protect them, or teach them how to protect themselves. I'll have to talk with Adhira about that. Next, there was a case of Valin survivors, if they can even be called such. In short, the situation went like this. The Science Council decided to resurrect the Valin, but the decision was not without its downsides. Long story short, our current technology was not sufficient enough to bring the Valin back as truly sentient species. Instead, they were brought back as a cross between VI and regular droids. They have full access to their memories and they are relatively self-aware, but it is not true sentience. truth is, it's worse than what we expected. Now, I'm not the one for the flights of fancy, but this entire situation looks like something straight out of fantasy novel, and the Valin are like undead brought back to life by some deranged necromancer. They move, they talk, they have all their memories, but they're just bland, empty. Now, Dr. Poniewski seems to be sure that as soon as we develop truly sentient AI, which by the way may not be the greatest idea, then the Valin will surely regain their full sentience. Until then, we settled them on Upshola 9, renamed to New Valin, and placed them under protection of our monitoring teams. And that was it, until you start thinking about consequences. This entire situation made us realize just how little we know about life itself. We brought the Valin back, and one day we may even return to them all their mental faculties, but will it be a true life? Can true life exist without an organic body? Or will it merely be a simulation? More importantly, how can we describe life? Damn, for years thinking like that was a domain of philosophers. To think that we are now in a place where we have to discuss it for real. It's simultaneously magnificent and terrifying, but I know one thing. This knowledge may one day be instrumental to the Commonwealth. I can only hope that our future generations will know how to use it. Then, in February 2256, Chancellor Lin did something that surprised not only me, but the rest of the Commonwealth as well. Turns out, she and her Xenoist party were already after several rounds of negotiations with the Queptilian people of the Alliance of New Beginning, and the result of these negotiations was a surprise even for me. Somehow, Lin managed to convince these aliens to join us. Granted, they were already our semi-protectorate, but once the deal Lin proposed goes through, they will become fully integrated part of our nation like Aramathi. Now, the details of the deal are simple. The Queptilium will retain a part of their autonomy of their homeworld, but aside from that, they will subject themselves to laws of the Commonwealth, on the same grounds as the rest of our citizens. In exchange for that, they will, of course, gain access to all our technological advances, and I think that was the part that truly convinced them to accept this deal. As newcomers to the galactic scene, the Alliance was weak before it aligned itself with us. By joining the Commonwealth, their safety will be guaranteed, and, of course, the quality of life of their people will improve drastically. We'll bring them our medicine, our genetic therapies and our vitality boosters, and we'll bring them our automated walkers and other tools that will work for them. But most importantly, we'll bring them stability. Or so I hope, at least. And in order to promote this stability, Lin and Ishii decided to continue building up the Expanse project by adding up a Harmony branch. Now, when I was still in charge, I thought about focusing a bit more on diplomatic matters, but considering our current situation, I'd say that this option may actually be better. After all, we still have time to make friends around the galaxy, but before we can do that, it would be best to focus on our internal issues first, and a special government agency focused on improving our stability sounds like a perfect tool for that job. Because despite the picture of the Commonwealth that we show to outside observers, the truth is that we still have problems. The Aramathi, for instance, are grateful for liberating them, but some of the more conservative ones are having troubles to adapt to our political system, where every citizen has a vote. Even more so for the Yadrans. Sure, Ivanuk's serviles may be okay with our way of life, because they are okay with any way of life as long as someone tells them what is expected of them, but their former Cartheman masters are still outraged by the way we govern ourselves around here. Not all of them though. Those who fled to our worlds before we recaptured their homeworld were more open-minded and adapted quickly, and to be honest, it is mostly thanks to their support that we managed to keep their brothers and sisters from starting an open rebellion. And of course, you cannot forget about all the immigrants, be it refugees or regular ones. I guess it comes as a part of being one of the most advanced nations in this galaxy. Races from all across the stars see us as a perfect place to settle, simply by the virtue of us offering better quality of everyday life. And speaking of immigrants, we recently welcomed another group of them, this time on Zanam. Now, some questioned government's decision to allow them to settle there, but the aliens in question were actually the squid-like Sundrithans, who evolved on an ammonia world and simply couldn't live anywhere else. And while I may be the first to admit that their appearance may not be the most pleasant one, with their faces being made mostly of writhing tentacles, but once you get to know them better, they turn out to be one of the more charismatic and sociable species to live within our borders. Born politicians, these ones. I'm pretty sure it won't be long before we see some of them in the parliament. Overall, everything seems to go alright for the Commonwealth in the past few years. The unrest on Yadran worlds slowly died down. Not completely, but Ishi mentioned that Yadrani and Katanab were no longer closed to civilian movement. And, perhaps most importantly, in May 2258, negotiations between Commonwealth and the Alliance of New Beginning came to a successful end, and the Alliance and all Queptilian people officially became a part of our nation. Though, to be honest, they have been our citizens for years now in anything but name. Almost every city on the New Beginning has been redesigned and rebuilt by our masons. Our shaper teams helped them deal with pollution that plagued their world since Industrial Revolution. Our delvers and tenders were improving their infrastructure for over a decade now, and our skippers constantly ferried advanced goods built in our factories to their homeworld. Even their fleet was mostly led by our officers, and now, with their ships becoming the official part of Commonwealth Navy, we were able to outfit them with newest weapons and defensive systems, although we kept their original design. Not only will that allow the Queptilian crews to better fit in with the rest of our navy, it will also provide Task Force Manticore with some much-needed variety. Say what you will about our vessels, they may be advanced and efficient, but their blocky design isn't exactly eye-catching. Plus, the Queptilians themselves will be a welcome addition to our fleet, since, by all accounts, they seem to handle themselves surprisingly well in space. But there was still one matter to attend to. One of the points in our deal with the Alliance was to allow them to, for a while at least, act like a semi-independent sector that would retain its own government, led by a Commonwealth-appointed governor. Only question was who that governor would be. It was, after all, an extremely important position, and a first one like that, so it would be wise to give it to someone well respected in our society. The candidates were as follows. Speaker Kodrales Hatsald, a charismatic Aramathi who was one of the leaders of the democratic movement on planet Uzema. Captain Arush Gupta, a former officer from Task Force Manticore, decorated both after battles of Yadrani and Zanam. Not the most politically minded candidate, but well respected nonetheless. Sakleen Superdam, a Grolferb scientist who led the refugees of her race into our territory, where she helped them free themselves from centuries of dogmatic propaganda spread by the government, and also initiator of great education program on planet Moroz. And finally, Ursula Sinan, granddaughter of financial mogul Demetrius Sinan, but an influential figure in her own right. All worthy candidates, but in the end the honor went to Grolferb Professor Sakleen. Not only she embodies the major values of the Commonwealth, like pragmatism and logical thinking, she is also a living proof that all races, no matter how minor their numbers may be, can advance in the Commonwealth based on their merit. From what I've heard, she went to work with an inspiring fervor, and although many Queptilians were surprised by this decision, since most of them saw one of the Grolferb for the very first time, they quickly warmed up to the new governor. Unfortunately, while we managed to consolidate our lands and improve our stability, our neighbors grew more and more restless. It began quietly, some sporadic reports about anti-government sentiment growing in the north, but then, all of a sudden, in August 2258, another report arrived. King Hasgigentar Mezak, ruler of Kingdom of Yadra, has been deposed, and if only that was the end of that report.
Your Imperial Majesty, the deed is done. As promised, the throne is yours. Now it is up to you to fulfill your end of the bargain.
I have not forgotten, Shadowbound, but we are still not done. Summon the Dukes and let us get this over with.
As you wish, Your Majesty. Let them in.
Finally. Your Highness, what is the meaning of this? There are alien soldiers at the door and... By all that is good, what has happened here? Where is King Mezak? I demand explanation! Calm yourself, Duke Malnaj. Your king has failed you, just as he failed all of his people. Because of his failures, I have invoked the ancient law of oversight, and claimed my rightful place as the Empress of all Yadrans. This is not possible. You cannot just walk into the court and declare yourself an Empress. If anything, the Gathering must first declare if the king truly is unworthy of his title. So I ask once again, where is His Highness?
Your disgraced king is now walking the azure halls with his ancestors, Duke Malnaj. And if you won't control your outbursts, then you will soon join him. Now bow before your empress.
I do not answer to you, puppet of slaver guilds. And you! How could you do such a thing? I merely invoked my right, Duke Malaj. Is it not true that, throughout our history, it was a sacred right of the Imperial bloodline to step in whenever leadership of our kings proved insufficient? Yes, but not a single emperor of old gained his throne through outright assassination. You have violated thousands of cycles of our tradition, and if you think that I will follow you simply because you are the last of the Imperial bloodline, then you are wrong. I want nothing to do with this disgraceful coup, my lady, so if you don't mind, I'm going to see myself out.
Should I bring him to heel, Your Majesty?
No, let him leave. He lost his home, his family, and his wealth when Billy once landed on Katanab, so he will pose no threat, and I do understand his bitterness. But more than that, he was right. Lords of the Gathering, I take full responsibility for my actions. I know that by having King Mezak assassinated in his own home, I brought dishonor upon the Imperial bloodline. I know that His Majesty was a good king, wise, just, and fair in rule, but he was a good king for a different, more civilized time. It may be difficult to accept because of centuries of peace, but today, when our homeworld has been conquered not once but twice, it falls upon me to steer Yadran people in a new way, a way that will allow us to regain our home and prevent our extinction in the future. And if I have to stain my honor for all eternity in order to do so, then so be it. If you want no part in this, then it is your decision. I will not force any one of you to follow me into the fray against their will. But if, like me, you wish to see our home recaptured and our glory restored, then join me and let us walk together to see the kingdom of Yadra restored, so that we may live in peace once more.
That went surprisingly well, if I may be so bold, Your Majesty. It seems you managed to convince all of the dukes, except poor Malaj, of course, to rally behind you. Not a development my masters expected.
Because, unlike you, we are structured people, and we respect established authority instead of wealth. But the most important thing was honesty. They would never support me if not for the fact that I admitted my crimes.
If you say so, Your Majesty. My job here is done then, but now it is time for you to fulfill your end of the deal.
Very well, Shadowbound. You can tell your masters that they will have our support in the coming conflict, at least until we regain control of our home. But let me be honest with you, I do not like our chances against the Commonwealth, even with our forces operating together.
Worry not, Your Majesty. My masters may not be as honorable as your people, but they are not known to throw their resources away on suicide attacks. That is something they prefer others to do.
I do not like this implication, Shadowbound.
Oh, you think I mean you and your people? Worry not, Your Majesty. The League has other plans for you, but know that there is another power that, like us, seeks to cut these overambitious humans down to size. I'm not allowed to tell anything more, but let's just say this. When the war starts, look to the east. The children of the light are coming.